coming out on a Monday morning, but really very poignantly today on Armistice Day. It's a day that makes me tremble and weep because all of us I know have seen so much loss in war. So it's a real honour to stand before you today on this solemn occasion and remember those who have given so much in service to our country and to the world. Lest we forget the title of this lecture. We've all said it hundreds of times. It's a phrase that has become synonymous with the commemoration of those who fought in the world wars and countless conflicts since. And in these increasingly dark and turbulent days, it speaks not just to the past, but to our present and our somewhat vacillating future. As the world reels from Trump's return to the global stage, and geopolitical tensions and the terrible violence of multiple ongoing conflicts looks more likely to persist or indeed to escalate, it seems imperative to remember the cost of war itself. To say, lest we forget, is to make a promise, to never forget the sacrifices of those who served, to honour their courage, and to learn from their experiences. As an artist, like all artists, I guess, I try in some small way to hold up a mirror to our times. And this is one mirror and one such promise. It's my promise not to forget. As you saw in the film, it's my main remembrance painting commemorating the 456 British personnel who were killed during our deployment out there before our shambolic withdrawal in August 2015. Notwithstanding our disgraceful departure, it is an extraordinary privilege to serve and work with the British Armed Forces. These are ordinary young men doing an extraordinary job in extraordinary times, and their dedication, their professionalism, and their courage is profoundly humbling. I think that can be no better summed up than in this soldier Sean in his pre-deployment letters to his parents. Sean was killed on the last day of his tour in Afghanistan, and today I'd like us to remember Sean as we remember the human cost of war and all the lives that have been lost and all the families like his that have been shattered by it. Today, tomorrow, every day. Sorry, that's slipped on one. There we go. Millions of people are waking up in countries at war. Some will never return home. Khalil here, who's videoing, is from Beirut. Others will rebuild what's been destroyed, but no one in this world any longer is untouched by conflict. Over the 20 years that I've worked as a war artist, from Iraq to Afghanistan, from Syria to all across the Middle East, and most recently Ukraine, I have seen the brutal reality of modern warfare in all its raw pain. Residential areas, schools such as this, hospitals deliberately targeted. This school was occupied by Russians in Hostomel, where the Russians first came in their all-out invasion, with crates of live ammo piled up in the classrooms. Gas masks were heaped on desks, cigarettes stuffed out in tiny children's ballet shoes. These classrooms, these were in Syria, now sit empty, carrying the silent memories of learning, play, opportunity, and hope. These ghost schools are a sharp reminder that it is children who stand on the front line of today's most brutal conflicts. Nearly 70% of the deaths in Gaza are women and children. Overall, 44% of the victims are children, and with the biggest single category being the ages between 4 and 9 years old. 100 years ago, the Declaration on Children's Rights was drawn up. It was drafted and never seen through, but it demanded that the child must be the first to receive relief in times of distress. The child that is hungry must be fed. Today, that child is shot at, trafficked, deported, raped, caught up and entangled in the unimaginable chaos and violence of war. Young girl said this 9-year-old, she was a Ukrainian girl called Galia. In the first week of Russia's all-out invasion, Galia and her mother tried to flee their village in their family car, but they were stopped by Russians in tanks. The Russians shot the mother dead, while her daughter quickly hid under the back seat of the car and miraculously survived. On Mother's Day, a few weeks later, Galia wrote in her diary here that I was shown, "Dear Mum, this is a letter as a present for you for the 8th of March. If you think that you've wasted time bringing me up, then you are wrong. Thank you for the best 9 years of my life. Thank you very much for my childhood. You are the best mom in the world. I shall never forget you. I wish you happiness in heaven. I wish you to go to a paradise. We shall meet in the paradise, and I shall try to behave well in order to get there. I kiss you, Galia." This is my tribute to Galia and every girl like that out there, but also to every mother unable to protect their child. This painting, which was inspired by the many damaged icons I saw across Syria and Ukraine, is also, though, about the potential within children, the strength and beauty of Galia's words, the innate dignity and perspicuity that children of war can demonstrate. It seems to me that often God is most readily encountered in some of the most piteous corners of the world and amongst the most vulnerable. I have encountered children time and time again who, with extraordinary courage and resilience, seem to resist despair. Children like this who turn burnt tanks into playgrounds, fences and walls into climbing frames, bomber planes, like in this painting, into paths of peace. Children have an innate ability to see straight through things from a different perspective and in a different light. And over the past few years, I have worked with children such as this 16-year-old. This is not my painting. This was done by a 16-year-old who painted this in an attempt to imagine what war must look like through children's eyes. To imagine the courage that it takes to walk through the darkness that was once your own city, trying to find a way forward, a way through the elaborate bestiality of war, a lit path back to your home, your parents, your peace. The truth is, though, that for so many people, there is no lit path. To quote Margaret Atwood, damaged people damage people. The fighting seeps into children's games and worldviews, impacting them in ways that they will carry forever. "I don't want to learn," one Ukrainian boy said to me. "I want to do to the Russians the same as they did to us." Damage repeats, children repeat, history repeats. And trauma manifests itself into an endless cycle of violence. Once peaceful, the nights are now haunted by terror. Children and adults alike are haunted by memories of hell, once witnessed, never forgotten. In a world of war, innocents grow up learning only a language of violence, bloodshed, air raid sirens, missiles, shrapnel, fear, loss. Then they go on to develop that language. These children, to my mind, are like the broken windows that are the hallmarks of modern conflict. To attack the child is to attack a nation's future. Once conduits of light like these windows, these dark chasms now speak of violent rupture, splintering and fragmentation. Shattered children, like shattered glass, fall into an abyss. They become sharp, brittle, fragments of a former whole, hard and dangerous to touch. This young girl, as you saw in the video, was brought into a medical outpost in Sangin in Helmand province. Terrified and traumatized, she was unable to speak. Her whole life had been that of war, and she couldn't walk. But as I sketched her crumpled little body, I saw something else. I saw beyond her trauma to that tender grace within her father's embrace, and the timeless coming together of a people dignified in their strength and resilience as well as their grief. And these are not, of course, the scenes that we so often identify with Afghanistan, but they are the quieter, hidden realities found in the silence that falls when the clatter of guns die away. And it is in the stillness of these moments that we see the human face of war, which is really where my particular interest lies. I try not to dwell on arguments for or against political parties, nor on opposing strategies. It's complex enough. But to allow the experience of individuals to reveal the human impact of political and military decisions. Of course, we all know that the drivers of today's conflicts, the politicians, the leaders, the Trumps, who sit in their seats of power and palaces, they are not the ones who suffer. The real wars are found in the quiet bravery of soldiers and civilians who endure far more than you and I can ever imagine. These women I met in Syria in 2018, and I spent an evening with them. They were desperate to tell their stories to the world. They had all lost their homes, livelihoods, loved ones, children, and they wanted to be seen, and they couldn't understand why, like the people in Lebanon and Gaza today, the world had forgotten them. One lady said to me, "I lost my car, okay. I lost my house, okay. My neighborhood, okay. My 2 children." Makes me cry. This is when I thought I couldn't go on, but I do. Another lady said to me, "We make from destruction construction, from death life. This is the will of the Syrian people. We love life. We love peace. We want to go from the worst to better. If you are not looking for better, then you are dead." The voices that I heard amongst those still living in Syria were not entirely broken. They were those of defiance, of anger, of longing. Longing to heal what has been shattered, mend what is broken, gather in what is scattered through a language of peace. And it's profoundly humbling to listen to a people who have endured such horror and hate, speaking of the need of love and peace. The urgent need to repatriate the young, the talented, the skilled, students, a whole lost generation. But the truth is that they cannot go back home. There is no home for so many to return to, and no security to protect them if they do. The Syrians who I talked to in Lebanon were terrified that they will simply be disappeared or forced into military conscription if they return to Syria. And it breaks my heart that today it's the Lebanese who are offering the Syrians refuge. They themselves are now victims of war, fleeing their homes and away from the bombs. But where do they go? Refugees, each of them with their individual dreams and their lives that they've built up so carefully. What becomes of them when they cannot go home and they cannot go forward? What becomes of children of war? Girls who remain prey to trafficking and systemized sexualized violence. I met one young Syrian girl, she was called Ravda. She was so strong, but she had been systematically raped since she was a child, and she wrote a small poem. "I am sister, daughter, friend. Most importantly, I am a human being. I am here to say no to rape, to marriage, to keep my childhood, my dreams. This is Dana, who sleeps with her beautiful eyes open. Dana, raped at the age of 6, again and again." This is happening across the whole world, every day in Sudan, in the Middle East, and in Ukraine. We all see it, and I know it's very hard to know how to respond, how to act. To find one's place morally and ethically in today's world is a challenge. And so overwhelmed are we by a continuous newsreel of sadness and atrocity that the temptation is to turn away in despair and to think we can do nothing. But in doing so, I think we deceive ourselves. And compassion fatigue, or to quote Pope Francis, the globalization of indifference, settles over us, obliterating the sharp edges and the urgent need for change. Instead, I believe that we could and should see within the state of the world today a call to reimagine who we all are in relation to one another, individually and collectively, and in doing so, to refine the common thread that binds the mosaic of all of our lives together. Life, after all, is what each of us has in common, and this installation, which is I call Suspended, is a celebration of that. It was made up of clothes discarded by Syrians, Iraqis, Afghans, Eritreans, arriving in Lesbos at the height of the refugee crisis in 2015. Excuse me. I went to Lesbos, having spent the previous decade working with Iraqis in Afghanistan and focusing on the human cost of war, because I felt a personal connection to those refugees fleeing those countries who, arriving on the beaches, told me with great joy and in their own words, "I come here for new life. I come here for hope, for peace, for education." Many of them did not expect the brutality of the traffickers, nor the welcome that Europe gave them. The scale of the human drama and tragedy on those beaches was overwhelming. Now, I didn't go thinking I could change anything or to find the solutions, but I did go in the hope that I might be able to create something, a body of work, that would lay down some sort of moral matrix for having that urge to change things and for making that urge intelligible. And so my first response was this installation entitled Flight. It was a dinghy, I know some of you saw it, that I salvaged from Lesbos and hung above the nave of St. James's Piccadilly during the Christmas of 2015. This ferry boat was found in the Aegean with 62 refugees on it. They were drifting, their engine had broken, and they were taking on water. Had the Aegean Coast Guard not spotted them, a watery grave would have been the end to all their dreams. As you can see, I installed it with the bow plunging down towards the altar and 3 life jackets tumbling out of it, the infant one falling as if just out of his parents' reach. The 3 life jackets, of course, were intended to evoke the story of Mary and Joseph, who became refugees after giving birth in dangerous circumstances to a child who grew up to change the course of world history. The response to Flight was truly humbling and extraordinary. It went global, and I was inundated with amazing children's drawings and letters and poems, depicting dreams of home, of safety, of security, and also flight. Ali from Syria wrote to me, "The smugglers are traitors. They said we would reach Greece in 15 minutes. They said the children would not need life jackets." His wife and 7 children died, trapped under the deck of the boat when the engine failed. It's difficult to imagine humans more powerless than children locked under the deck of a sinking boat with no life jackets. Now, I know that art can't change the world, but I hope that those who stood under that boat or looked up at these clothes might have felt something of that cry of anguish that I felt standing on those beaches. This is that cry. It is a plea to all of us, to the world, that this suffering cannot go on. It's a call to resistance against the horrors of war and the greed and the corruption of those who seek to dehumanize their fellow human beings. It's also an act of empathy and solidarity as we reach out to all those in plight. Kafka, one of my favourite writers, once wrote, "Art should shatter the frozen seas within us." And I like to think that the many tears that were shed onto these clothes were perhaps the meltwaters of those frozen seas. In such a way, I see art as an opening, a conversation, like the words left behind in a school in Syria. These children, these women have been living for months on end under siege in Aleppo. And they held strength in their heart and would not give in to despair. When in a time of bomb, these words speak more eloquently than any shell, the desire for peace more loudly than the destruction of war. In a similar way, rather than trade on the aesthetics of despair, I try to focus on the courage, the resilience, and on the light that can banish the darkness. Because my work is actually, sad as it is, it's about light. I lit suspended from the centre to represent the light of hope by which a refugee travels, and to ask us to seek that light within ourselves that will validate that hope. The light that will not allow us to turn our backs in prejudice or fear or pure laziness on the plight of thousands. As it dimmed, and this was on a continuous circuit, it also served to remind us of the darkness in which we leave our fellow human beings, should we ignore them. So this installation is my plea that instead of walls, we build bridges. And in doing so, we recognize the human connection that this seeks to elicit. Because these clothes ask us to consider, did this child have his or her first Christmas? Or was it buried like this present below the rubble? A Christmas celebration that was never to happen, never enjoyed, presents never to be opened, card games unfinished. Because each of these items, they hold an inner life, each a story. They're like portraits, as illustrated by this personalized t-shirt that speaks of far happier times. These are people just like us, not a faceless category. Mothers, daughters, father's son, each life, like the wearer of this shoe, is unique and precious and carries with it its own secrets. As the poet Yevtushenko describes, no people are uninteresting. Their fate is like the chronicle of planets. Nothing in them is not particular, and planet is dissimilar from planet. And if a man lived in obscurity, making his friends in that obscurity, obscurity is not uninteresting. To each his world is private, and in that world one excellent minute, and in that world one tragic minute. These are private. And in any man who dies, there dies with him his first snow, and kiss, and fight. It goes with him. When we are confronted by this, we are confronted by our own humanity. But for the accident of birth, these little children could be part of the same family who comes to my studio keen to be painted. Or children like my own son, full of ideas and mischief and wonder. Girls, I've got to throw my family in here, like my daughter, who are allowed to grow up slowly, with security, with peace, with a top education and opportunity. So alike, but so unalike, these children that I've seen on my journey. These are orphans of war, robbed of their parents, their childhood, their safety to dream, a generation lost to displacement. One Syrian lady wrote to me, "I am motherless, fatherless, homeless, broken beyond repair. I was protected, respected, unaffected by death's unrelenting stare. But do you care? Do you look into my eyes and fall deep into the chasm of my sorrow, or hold my hand as I face another tomorrow? Will you share my pain? Will you borrow it, just for a while, and let me rediscover my smile? Now I am the mother to my orphan brother. No more pink ribbons for my hair, or the company of even my teddy bear. Sometimes I see her, Glimpses, the beautiful girl who looks just like me, except she can't be me. She was whole, and I am the leftovers of war. She was really happy. Happiness is a dialect I can't speak anymore. Have you recognized me? I am the ashes, scattered between three syllables, refugee, left in the grasp of a bittersweet memory of childhood. I think it's an astonishing poem, and in the same way, my paintings, I try and open up a space in all of us in which we can make ourselves vulnerable to see afresh. The word vulnerable, it's interesting, comes from vulnerare, which means meaning to wound. Vulnerability means open to being wounded. And to quote Rumi, one of my favourite writers, the wound is the place the light enters you. I see that light as hope, as acceptance and transformation. Hope is not a prize or a gift, but it's something that we earn through resisting the ease of despair. Emily Dickinson called it a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings a tune without words and never stops at all. Of the many we helped off the boats in Lesbos, I pulled this little boy out of the water. He was 5 or 6 and he clung to me, soaked to the skin, shaking with fear and cold. Once wrapped in a blanket, however, and dry, he dug into his child's rucksack and, with a simple thank you, he presented me with a little red, fluffy heart with the words, "I love you," on it. His sobbing father told me he had carried it all the way from his home in Aleppo, determined to give it to the first person in Europe who welcomed him. The words welcome and thank you hung in the air as I turned away in bits, overwhelmed and heartbroken, in impotent shame. For what was he thanking me? But Suspended and all my work is about trying to make ourselves worthy of that thanks. So I ask all of us here today, let us not be bystanders on the sidelines of history. I ask that we engage with these issues with compassion, with empathy, and a shared sense of humanity. I ask that we try and counter the likes of Trump and Putin and fulfill the words promised by the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. I ask that we believe in and work towards a world in which every child can fly a kite, high and free above their war-torn city, and where they can dream of freedom once more, of music, of dancing, of laughter. Because even in Afghanistan, where women are no longer allowed to read, to study, to even own a smartphone or speak in public, Afghanistan, I know, is still a country of girls who love to dance. Like these school children that I met under the cliffs of Banyan. They said to me, tell them when you go home, we are not just a land of men and beards and guns. We are girls who like to dance and wear red lipstick. I was reminded very poignantly of this scene when I was working in Syria, where amidst the ruins in Aleppo, I saw a group of boys, teenagers, holding hands and dancing. One of them told me, you can choose to hold on to sadness and loss, or you can dance. Rumi wrote, dance when you're broken. Dance when you're broken open. Dance. If you've torn the bandage off, dance in the middle of the fighting. Dance in your blood. Dance when you're perfectly free. There's an old saying that if God exists, then it casts long shadows, but it also shines more brightly beyond them. War lies low in those shadows, but a single sunbeam is strong enough to drive them away. Now these sunbeams come in all forms, like this old Afghan schoolmaster who has never stopped teaching in 40 years of conflict, or Syrians who pray to never give in to hate despite enduring the endless suffering of their country. One of these was an apprentice monk who was kidnapped and brutally tortured and held for 118 days. When I asked him, Did you ever forgive your captors? He replied with complete astonishment. When I was in captivity, I prayed for the forgiveness of my captors every day, just as I had done before. This is when the shadow to recede, and the possibility of hope, of forgiveness and renewal comes forward. I was poignantly reminded of this when we went to Homs, where I met a man adorning the ruins of his bombed out house over Easter with these Easter decorations. Instead of crying, he was creating, and he was painting little chocolate eggs to give to children passing by. You know, the first shop to open after Dresden was so terribly bombed was not a food shop or basic supplies, it was actually a flower shop. I think that speaks volumes about the testament to the human spirit. I'm interested really in what holds people together and not just what pulls people apart. So that painting that you saw, the woman in Afghanistan making fire briquettes for the winter, it's these connected threads of hope and endurance. And I just want to finish really with 10 years ago, almost to the day, I was in Lashkargah police station to meet the first policewoman of Helmand province. These are women who had hope where no hope should have been. And stop and think about that for a second. The first policewoman in Afghanistan. Back then, this heralded the great beginning of things for Afghanistan. Change, progress, education for girls, all led by women. Now, one can only wonder at the courage required to do that sort of job when your whole family stood violently against you, when your own brother threatened to shoot you because you stepped out of your house into a man's world, when all you were trying to do was to move your country forward. These extraordinary women reached out to me like a sister. They could have resented my intrusion, my coming in for one day, but they didn't. And as we shared tea, we laughed and giggled like children. But then, when they talked about their work, they become steely and serious. And they tell me how hard it was and the daily risk to their lives that it imposed. One of the ladies with me that morning was called Islam Bibi. She was the head of the policewoman team and mother of 4 small children, and she was shot dead a few months later on her way to work. Islam Bibi knew the risks, she told me, and she knew that like so many who have followed her, that she would pay the ultimate price for her belief. But she also knew that for every one of them, brutally shot down, persecuted and silenced, there will always be others coming up who will continue to rise against tyranny and violence, and they do, and we're seeing that today. These women burn like beacons in the dark days of Afghanistan, Ukraine, and across the Middle East right now. And this is what my work is about. It is as much about the spark of divinity within the human spirit as it is about the tragedy of war. It is about exile and despair, yes, but it is also about the courage and hope that can be born out of darkness. In our unpredictable, overheated, and dangerous world, it is also about finding the stillness, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, the beauty in the pain, the light in the darkness, and the urgent need for us all to act with compassion, respect, and understanding towards our fellow human beings. Lest we forget is not simply a plea to remember the past, but a call to action for the future. So coming together today is about committing ourselves to ensuring that future and the future generations don't have to endure the same horrors that I've seen. And it is a call for us all to strive for a world where the lessons of history guide our choices, where diplomacy and understanding replace the horrors of conflict. May we never forget those lessons, and may we always strive for a world where peace prevails. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There was one word that you came back to time and time again, and that's the word hope. Rabbi Hugo Gryn, who was marching with his father between 2 death camps, forced to by the guards. He lost all of his family in concentration camps in Germany, and at the time he was not yet 14. And his father said words that he recorded, which were, "Remember, you can last 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, but you cannot last 3 minutes without hope."
Very good.
Your pictures tell stories.
And while there are people who want to have a better life, there's always going to be hope. Thank you very, very much indeed. That's put a new complexion on, I think, many people's perspective, and really, really wonderful. Arabella, thank you.
Thank you.